today. So I've explained the kind of format of this afternoon. My next point is to ask both the politicians who are here to just lay out in a couple of minutes what their party's commitments are to young people. I'm going to do this in very fair way. I'm going to do it in alphabetical order, so there's no by first name. So I'm going to invite Marie to speak for 2 minutes and just outline for us the SNP's commitments in their manifesto once it's published. I don't think it's published yet, is it? For young people, and how she sees Scotland developing under an SNP administration. Thanks, Marie.
Thanks, Celia, and you caught me off guard there, because I'm very rarely first in an alphabetical, being a Todd these days. I thought what I would do is lay out some of the things that the SNP government have achieved. I can't tell you about the manifesto because it's launched tomorrow, but let me tell you about our track record. Every baby in Scotland gets a baby box. And that is a welcome to every single baby that arrives in Scotland. It's also a commitment to an equal start in life. Under fives, we've nearly doubled early learning and childcare, which will close the attainment gap before it ever opens. Primary school, free school meals, secondary school, counsellors in every school, and underpinning all of our commitments to children, the absolute jewel in the crown is UNCRC incorporation, a revolution in children's rights, which we are very keen to see delivered as soon as we can possibly manage. But it doesn't just stop there with under 18s. We've got some great policies for children starting out in life. So free bus travel for up to 22-year-olds, and a commitment to stave off paying council tax until you're 22 as well, which I think will make a significant difference to young people starting out in life. Tomorrow is our manifesto commitment. I've already recorded the clip for it, and I have to say I am very excited about it, and I hope you will be too when you see our policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Paul, can I invite you then to talk to us about the Labour Party's commitment? Just say a wee bit about yourself, Paul, as well, if you can.
Sure. Thank you, first of all, to our young people and to Aberlour for hosting this event and this opportunity to really listen to your voices and your views. I think that's really helpful. And I think Sally said it'll be quite an informal event, which I think is great. Very often hustings become a bit stuffy and a bit political, so it'll be nice to have a conversation, I think, really important. My name is Paul O'Kane. I am Scottish Labour's spokesperson for further education, higher education and science. I'm in our education team, but also I'm a counsellor in East Renfrewshire, and I'm the convener for education in East Renfrewshire. So for a number of years now, I've been engaged in the provision of children and young people services and indeed education. So I've had lots of opportunity to listen to the voices of lots of different young people, and indeed to kind of implement and put forward policies that we've worked on together. Scottish Labour in this election are really focused on our recovery as a country from the pandemic. We've all lived through really difficult times. We're still living through those difficult times. I mean, this past year for everyone has been hugely challenging. I know how challenging it has also been for young people, particularly around issues like being able to get to school, being able to be at school, being able to see family and friends and have social connection, and indeed being able to get all the right support in terms of your life, whether that be your mental health support or support with living in your own house or any of those issues. So it's been a hugely challenging year. I think young people have shown time and again how resilient they can be, but also have had a lot of need for support, essentially. We're really focused on how do we ensure that support's there. How do we also ensure that getting into recovery, young people don't get forgotten in the mix? Because we know that education has to be the heart of that recovery, ensuring that there's a plan for young people who have maybe missed out on learning, who need to recover their learning in some ways. We also want to really focus on how do we help young people to get some of the social time back that they've missed out on. We've talked about there needs to be a summer recovery, and the summer holidays need to be used not saying, oh, young people should be back in school over summer holidays. It should be about saying, how do they get access to activities? How do they get access to groups and clubs if that's what they want to do, or how do they get access to sporting activities, and make sure that's affordable for young people and free as well. So that's a big focus. And I think the other two areas of recovery I'm really keen to talk about today are our plan for a jobs recovery, because that's important. I know that worries young people a lot about how can you access employment. That was a challenge before the pandemic. We know that that's a huge challenge now coming out of the pandemic, because we've seen a lot of people badly lose their jobs or not have a job to go back to. So we want to really invest in skills and training and jobs, especially for young people, to ensure that there are jobs for them in the future. And the last thing I would say is just climate recovery is a huge important issue. And I know from speaking to young people how important it is that we get this right. Young people are the generation who are telling us quite clearly, if we don't get this right now, then they will have to live with those consequences. So COP26 coming to Glasgow, a huge moment for us. Again, the recovery has to be a green recovery, and we are very much invested in that. So you'll hear me talk a lot about recovery today, and I'm really keen to hear what you have to say as well, because you've all lived through this pandemic and are living through it. So really keen to hear your views on how we move forward to recovery.
Okay, Paul, thank you. And Alison's joined us. Delighted to have you here, Alison. We've got three young people, Vange, Cameron and Robert, and they're going to be speaking just shortly. But we've been given the party representatives an opportunity to just give us over a couple of minutes your commitments to young people in terms of this election, what it is you'll be arguing for as you go around Scotland campaigning for the Greens in this case. Alison.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Sally-Ann. And my apologies, I was having IT issues. I feel actually quite proud of myself during this pandemic, but there's a way to go. Yeah, I think this is a really important election. We're experiencing a pandemic. I mean, this is unprecedented. None of us are used to operating like this, for example. But we have that immediate emergency, but we have the other emergencies that I think we've been all too good at ignoring, and those are the climate and nature emergencies, which are inextricably linked. And I think it's fair to say it's the voices of young people that are driving the action that we do see. They are really demanding that we change what we're doing, that we're better, and we need to be better for them. I'm 55 now, but I want my daughter and my nieces and nephews and so on to grow up and have a really meaningful future. So we've got to start acting now. And the scientists tell us that we have 9 years to act in order to avoid irreversible climate catastrophe. In terms of this election, our manifesto was launched this morning, and that enables me to be a bit freer about what is in there, although I have to confess to not having read every single sentence yet. We'd like to see a greater focus on play in children's education, and we want formal schooling to begin at 7 in a kindergarten stage before that. And there is so much international evidence to back that call that, I'm really hopeful that the government, whoever forms the next government, will start to engage and move more quickly in that direction, because we know what countries have the best outcomes. We're really grateful for the work of the Independent Care Review, and we're determined to see to commit to the promise and to make sure that really does make a big difference. It's really incredible when you hear words like love being discussed in the parliamentary chamber. We don't do that often enough. If we're serious about getting it right for every child, we have to really commit to that holistic view. It's not enough to have a roof over your head and have someone looking after you. It's just, we want our young people to grow up feeling cherished and supported in every possible way. In our manifesto too, we've got a commitment to free access to sport for all young people and physical activity, and just to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to try out things, because you might not like one sport, but it doesn't mean it's not for you. There might be something that is really, you're just great at, or even you're not very good at, but you just really enjoy, and that can lead to a whole lot of other friendships and a habit that maintains fitness for life, a group of friends that you might not have come into contact otherwise. And I speak myself there from my own athletics background. I met folk I would never have known. I went to places I'd never have gone to, and I've continued to enjoy being involved, coaching and currently on the board of Scottish Athletics, where I come into contact with so many young people, and that's part and parcel of what I like about that lifelong involvement in that activity. We want to see the Young Carers grant doubled from £300 to £600. We've spoken to a lot of young carers about that. And we want to make sure that young carers are fully supported and that we have a care-aware society, and that teachers and other adults you're interacting with realise or appreciate why you might be 10 minutes late for class, or homework's not handed in. And it's not lack of interest, it's just lack of capacity with all the other things that you're trying to fit into the day. We're committing to huge spend on mental health to ensure that our CAMS, our child and adolescent mental health services, that these waiting lists are a thing of the past. You may not notice, I managed to break my arm last week, and that's given me a bit of bother. I was seen instantly, but we have waiting lists that are, they treat our mental health as if it were not as much of an emergency. That's got to change. We've got to have the capacity, the resources, the well-trained staff, and absolutely no wrong door. So if you need to see somebody at school, in your local GP surgery, wherever you might be, we want to make sure that there are mental health clinicians in our GP surgery. The GPs have longer appointment time, so you've got time to have a chat with them and find out where you're best directed to. And we want to fully involve the youth work sector in that, because sometimes you might not want to speak to your parents or even a GP, but you may well be happier speaking to a youth worker, and we want to make sure that they've got the training, the access to training that they need. So I think we just want to have a mental health aware society, a care aware society. Absolutely delighted that the UNCRC, that very important piece of those human rights, have been, well, we're trying to incorporate them into Scots law, aren't we? I can see Marie Todd smiling. A bit of pushback there from the Conservative government, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But that's a real step forward in making sure that your rights cannot be ignored, and also that we start to discuss rights as a society, because too many of us aren't aware quite as to what our rights are, and I think that's really important for young people. Anyway, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Apologies for being late, and pleased to be involved. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Alison. We're going to move on now to introduce our young people who are going to speak about things that are important to them, and they've also got a question or some questions for the politicians. So I was actually going to do this in alphabetical order, but I think Cammie's disappeared for the moment. Oh, he's back. He's back. So honestly, I'm going to.
These kids are going to be the death of me.
Have you got distractions there, Cammie?
You literally every 2 seconds they scream on me, scream my name.
All right. Okay. Are you all right to go first, Cammie? Are you quite happy just to? So the young folk have been given 10 minutes to go over what's most important to them, and also to ask politicians any questions they want to ask you. So over to you, Cameron. The stage is yours for the next 10 minutes.
Oh, great, 10 minutes. No, that's the wrong button. Bear with me, having a wee bit of issues with this.
Do you want me to come back to you, Cammie? Do you want me to get
I got it.
Okay, right. On you go.
So my name's Cameron, I'm 18, nearly 19, from Glasgow. So my issue is to talk about young people's mental health and emotional well-being. It means a lot to me because poor mental health is something I've struggled with my whole life. Lots of people I know struggle with their mental health in school, things like they're not getting the grades they needed to get their jobs they wanted, and it really affected them. I think more should have been done to support us during like the whole pandemic when it was first starting out. But now being in work, it makes me feel better, but it's not the job that I want to do, and it affects the way I feel as I get older. But trying to learn to cope with it now, a bit better, but I hate seeing other people go through it, like especially 14-year-olds and that, struggling like I did back then. And like anxiety as well is horrible to a lot of people and to me, because it makes you feel like you can't go anywhere without like having like panic attacks and just breaking down in front of nowhere. And yeah, I think young people need more help to cope with the feelings, especially after like coming out of the pandemic and the lockdowns. So basically my question is, what support and services can you promise young people like me to address this problem?
Thanks, Cammie. That's a really, really thoughtful and insightful question. And thanks for sharing some of your experiences, because they're really important in all of this as well. I'll ask Marie first, and then Paul and Alison to give you their answers.
Hi, Cami. Thanks for that. Those are really important questions, and I'm glad. I worked for 20 years in mental health, and I'm glad that we have moved on to an extent in that people speak more openly about mental ill health and about problems they might be experiencing. However, I don't think we've quite yet achieved parity with physical health. So I don't think, as Alison said, you know, she broke her arm and was immediately able to get the help that she required from A&E, and it was fixed and repaired and ongoing support. It's not like that for people with mental illness. Quite often you have to ask more than once. Quite often you have to ask several people, and that's an area that really needs to be improved. One of the challenges that child and adolescent mental health has is that it's got a bit overwhelmed because it's the big service that everybody gets referred to. And what needs to happen is there needs to be more support before people become unwell. So there needs to be, as I think you said it perfectly, that people need help with their feelings. Young people need help with their feelings. So one of the things we're doing as a party is putting in school counsellors. We've achieved that in the last year, and so that every high school there will be counselling available to support young people with their mental health. Now that will not only help the individual children, but it will also help to support a better understanding across the school. Teachers will be able to access that expertise so that they're more able to cope. So another thing that we've done, for example, is introduced bereavement. You know, we have a national bereavement coordinator. One of the things that's not an uncommon experience for young people is to be bereaved, and it's really overwhelming, and sometimes it can lead to mental illness, but it's actually not a very uncommon experience. So supporting children and young people through that experience where you have very strong emotions and a very difficult situation to work through can help to prevent developing more severe mental illness. And if we go right back to the fully preventative, before there's ever a problem, we've got a whole suite of things that we're putting in place to try to ensure that children and young people have really rich experiences, grow up strong and robust. And, you know, as Alison said, things like sport. So we're very interested in adverse childhood experiences. We know that sport and taking part in team sports, for example, is protective. That helps to prevent you from experiencing adverse life experiences, but it also helps to build resilience that lasts a lifetime. So we're quite keen to develop all of those opportunities for young people, but we need to shift some of our focus away from, we need to fix the acute, but we also need to fix the prevention to make sure that the system works smoothly. And one of the most important things is that you should be able to ask for help and get it quickly, get the right level of help at the right time in the right place, which can really help to prevent problems later on. And I think you put your finger right on the button when you talked about it impairing your life chances. You know, adolescence is a really crucial stage. It's really important. And you make lots of relationships and you choose, you know, make really important choices. And it's really important that we get it right for you at that time of your life.
Thanks, Marie. Cameron, do you want to say anything at this point, given what Marie has said? I mean, would you be able to say to us, the audience, what were the things that helped you, and what were the things that made things worse?
Like, things made worse to me was like people like just backstabbing me, and then people not like having to wait for the help and stuff like that, and they never even helped me. But I just coped with it through like music and that. I started writing music, like playing my guitar and that, started doing all that sort of stuff, writing down my thoughts, feelings and that, and turning them into songs.
And music's really important for so many young folk, isn't it? And it's such a healing thing. It can help. And what about in school? Did you get access to music tuition in school or anything?
Yeah, I got access. I passed advanced higher music.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay.
Can I just say on that, I've met a young lassie actually, I think it might have been at it was at a Cashback for Communities event, and she had learned DJing using the money that had come from organised crime. It had been put into this particular project, and they helped her. So you're absolutely right. Creativity and creative expression is really important to help.
Very much so.
Seems like it's like music, art, gaming, all that sort of stuff that I do to try and ease my mind out of things.
Brilliant.
Support too.
Thanks. I'm going to ask Paul to say a few words now, Cami, if that's okay.
Cheers, and thank you, Cami, for your input. I think for being really honest and sharing with us, I think that's a big thing to do. But I think you've just outlined there, talking about it, I think helps. Being able to talk about how you feel, and I think that there's a real degree of consensus, I think, around this in politics. I don't think it's an area where we're going to find a huge amount of disagreement. I think we all know the challenges that exist in terms of mental health. I think in the last 10 years, it's become a lot more talked about, and the stigma has been removed to a large degree, although we still have a long way to go, particularly for young men. And I say that obviously as someone who grew up, as a young man myself, and understand that it can be difficult, and we know the challenges that exist. But from our point of view, we've been supportive of the measures that have been taken around in-school counselling and ensuring access to a counsellor in school. I think what we would want to see is just how do we continue to expand the services that are available before you get into kind of crisis or the need for, as Marie said, acute services. So there is something for me around how do we improve, listening services in schools where, often third sector providers can come in and train kind of peer listeners. There's great projects where actually other young people in school who are older, maybe in 5th and 6th year, are trained in listening skills, who can help even just talk to younger pupils about how they're feeling and what they're thinking. I think also for teaching staff, because sometimes there are trusted teachers there, but how do we ensure that all teachers have skills and can be equipped to also be listening as well, before then the move to that formal counselling service, or indeed the CAMS. I think you make a really good point, Cami, about what are the kinds of activities that help when you are feeling that you've got challenges. And I think the point you make about music is great. I think sport as well. I think arts. Just having access to all of these things and ensuring that there's no barriers for young people to access them. Because very often we know cost of school day, cost of these activities can be prohibitive. We don't want to see that. Coming out of COVID, what we want, as I talked in my opening remarks, the summer comeback, there should be a huge investment in making sure that young people can have a kind of summer of whether it's art or whether it's music or whether it's even kind of days out and trips, an opportunity to really improve and sustain their mental health. And that shouldn't just be about the pandemic. That should also be about longer term. How do we invest in things like youth work or third sector organisations to make sure that young people have got places to go to do these activities?
Okay, thanks very much, Paul. Cami, do you want to ask Paul anything before we move on to Alison? Okay, thank you, Alison.
Yeah, thanks very much, Cami. I was really, it's really welcome that you're prepared to share your experience with us. And I was also, I noted that you said, you felt really sad now when you can see other younger people, maybe 14 and so, going through what you've been through. Yeah. And also, the fact that you realised that music made you feel better. I suppose we've got to get into a position where we're able to help everyone realise that there might be something that they can tune into that will make a difference. We've got to make sure that's possible for everyone. I just, the fact that we've got such long waiting lists for child and adolescent mental health tells its own story, because it's not just been a wee blip, it's been a constant theme, I feel, for my 10 years in Parliament so far. So we've got to change that, and we need to have a well-developed long-term mental health workforce plan so that we have enough people working in these services. Where I'll agree with Marie, it's not only acute services, but we've got to get better at making sure that you've got the services you need in your neighbourhood and that there's no wrong door, because we know some young people who have waited for months for an appointment with child and adolescent mental health service, and then they're told, oh, you're in the wrong place, or this isn't serious enough, or whatever. And it's back to square one, and it can just be too much for too many young people. So I think really a well-developed workforce, and I think we've got to do what we can as well to make, I mean, what a rewarding career. So we've got to make sure that people understand there'll be great training, they'll be well paid, because this is really important work, and they'll get so much out of it. Because what I really want to see, like, you know, you were talking about the stress of exams and so on. I do wonder, you know, we seem to have an epidemic at the moment of young people. I've got an older teenager back at home who's been, you know, university experience so far really has been looking at a screen and doing lectures online. And I think that is really, really, really massively challenging. But I just think, how much pressure are we putting on our young people to succeed, to get that exam, to get into that university or college, to get that job? You know, what has happened? Because mental health has always been an issue for society, but I do feel we've got particular problems at the moment. And it could be as well, you know, the existential threat of that we're facing. We have the pandemic, we have climate change. You have a lot on your plate to be concerned about, your own immediate circumstances, that bigger global picture. So I think the least we can do as politicians and adults who want to support you is make sure the services are in place that will make a difference. And, you know, certainly my own party's manifesto, I'm not going to reel out a ream of figures here, but they are all about making sure people have got the help that they need when they need it.
Okay. Thanks, Alison. Yeah. Now, Van just had her hand up. I know that this is, Vanja's going to ask her own question a wee bit later, but I know this is an area that she's particularly interested in as well. So if you don't mind, Cami, I'm going to ask Vanj to come in just now if she wants to.
Yeah, I was about to say, I had like a really bad like experience with CAMS and that, and going to mental health services and that, because they like belittled my issues. And when I spoke to people in school, like got put out of class and went to see the guidance teacher or something, after you talked about it, you wouldn't be able to like focus on school because you just go back to class and you just be stressed out. So I believe that there should be more, like, I think the teachers should be trained to help people with young, like with mental health and stuff, and that there really shouldn't have a need for counsellors if each teacher had to go through a course of mental health to help.
Really important view, I think, and I suppose, Van, you'll know, Cami, you'll know, so will you, Robert, what meets your needs. And it's important that we don't fall down a rabbit hole of one size fits all here, that children and young folk need choice about how they're supported. So counsellors are not going to work for everybody, and counsellors in school are going to work for even less. So yeah, important point, Vanj, thanks for that. I'm going to move on. Before I do that, I want to thank you, Cameron, for being so honest and asking really, really searching questions. Really appreciate it. It's a really brave thing to do in front of a public audience. So thanks for that. And I'm going to move on to Robert next to come in and ask his question and just say a wee bit about the things that are important to him.
Oh yeah, I hit the wrong thing. I hit the stop video instead of my mute button.
That's all right.
I'm not having a good day, honestly. So my name's Robert Morrison, and I'm 22 years old, and I'm from Dunfermline. So as a young person with disabilities, I've been lucky enough to have several chances to volunteer over the years with the local food bank. But although I've been grateful for these, I haven't been able to get my words out right. Been able to find paid employment with a company or organisation. So what I'm wanting to know from yourselves is, how do you plan to on helping and to create and provide more paid like places of like companies and organisations for young people with learning disabilities?
Okay, thanks for that. And I think if we can concentrate, politicians, please, on the learning disability bit of that, or children with complex needs, young people with complex needs. This isn't just as simple as a job guarantee scheme. So what are you particularly going to do for our young people who have learning disabilities, complex needs, and them entering the workforce? Is that a fair way of putting your question, Robert? Perfect, thank you. I'm going to come to Paul first on this one. I'm just conscious of time, folks, so if we can try and be as brief as possible. Thanks, Paul. On you go.
Thanks for the question, Robert. It's hugely important, and I'll declare an interest, as we say in politics. In my other life, I work for one of our national learning disability charities, so I've had quite a bit of experience of working with people who have a learning disability, looking at these issues. And I think you're absolutely right. Very often what seems to happen is that there are lots of opportunities around volunteering, and that can be well supported, but what then doesn't materialise at the other end often is a paid job or a good paid job. For too long, I think the attitude has often been, well, there's a job in Tesco, so that'll do you because, you know, that it's a job, you'd be really grateful for it. You know, you might want to work in Tesco, great, you know, super, but that's, again, we come back to one size fits all issues. It's not Sorry, Robert, go on.
I just want to say, it's hard for me to get, well, for young people with disabilities to get paid employment. So I don't know, volunteering as well. So I don't know if you can say any more about that, any like volunteering or paid employment.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, Sally Ann's point around, absolutely there'll be things about job guarantee schemes in our manifesto, but that's not enough because there needs to be the right support that sits along with that. So for me, there needs to be, and we need to really look at how do people who have learning disabilities particularly have job coaching, support in the workplace, employers that are trained to understand their needs, and someone who can support them in their employment as well. So we do need to see bigger and better investment in that, because the experiences I've had where young people particularly have had a job coach, have had their employer has been trained, those jobs have lasted a lot longer, they've been more meaningful, they've been more sustainable, and they've been the types of jobs that young persons want to do. So the other thing as well as that is employment support services. We need to invest in making sure that you're getting your needs met, so that someone's sitting down and helping support you to think about what kind of job you want to do, helping you to then experience that through either volunteering or work experience, and then going through things like the interview process and actually getting a job. So there will be stuff in our manifesto about that, but we have a real sense that it can't just be about here's a job, it needs to be about here's the support that sits alongside that.
Thanks, Paul. Robert, do you want to say anything at this point before we move on to Alison?
No.
Okay, thank you, Alison.
Hi, Robert. A really important question. You've obviously got a lot to offer, and you've been offering your time and your desire to make life better for other people with your volunteering. And you're absolutely right. It shouldn't be a case of being expected always to volunteer. We all need to be able to look after ourselves. I think, you know, help for young people with learning disabilities has to start at the earliest point. So from school, we've got to make sure that we have enough additional support needs teachers, that your education is as good as it could be and as well supported. But I think we need to incentivize, we need to make sure employers understand what talent they're losing out on. We need to understand that as a society as well. And I think when organisations and, you know, companies are bidding for government money, for example, I don't think they should have access to that unless they have a commitment to employ people with learning disabilities, or, you know, just it needs to be a fair system that incentivises making sure that everyone has an opportunity at work. And we know that the employment gap between people with learning disabilities, people with disabilities, you know, and those with, you know, and otherwise is just far too big, and it's not good enough. And this goes on and on and on. We don't see any change. So I think public procurement, quite a dry and techie subject, but that could be used to incentivise. We might also need, you know, a bit of firmer legislation. We cannot continue to ignore the skills and talents and ambitions of too many young people who have got so much to offer. I mean, in our own manifesto today, we've spoken about 100,000 jobs in the new technologies of the future. Now, some of that's going to be about rewilding and reforesting Scotland. Some of it's going to be in renewables. I think there are so many great jobs that there could be in the care sector, for example. And I'm absolutely convinced, you know, there'll be something out there for you, something that you'd be really good at. I'll certainly make a commitment myself to make sure that this is an area of particular focus for me if I'm re-elected in this next session of Parliament, because I think it's overlooked and it's very important, and I'll continue to do what I can to make sure your voice is heard. But thanks for a great question.
Thanks, Alison. Robert, do you want to come in with any?
Just want to say thanks for what you said there, Alison. It's like the paid employability and that, and the stuff out there for young people. So I'm just hopeful to get something in the near future for myself. Because before I was, before all this coronavirus pandemic happened, there was going to be hopefully volunteering in the cancer research shop in Dunfermline. Unfortunately, that came to a halt because of the COVID-19 outbreak. So I don't know if I'll go back to that or what will happen. That's all.
Yep, we need to all work harder, Robert. I can testify Robert would be a brilliant employee, as would many of our other young folk that we work with. So we need to get those barriers smashed down, don't we, Robert?
Yes, I do.
Marie, over to you.
Thanks, Sally-Ann. Robert, this is a brilliant question, and it's a really important one because the pandemic has changed the way we live and work and do everything. And actually what we found through the course of the pandemic is that some people with disabilities have been able to work from home and to have the adaptations that they needed in order to be employed. And we need to hang on to that after the pandemic has passed. So we've realized that employers can be more flexible and they can support people to work in different ways. It's also important, I mean, I live in the Highlands and we have suffered from centuries of depopulation. There are parts of the Highlands where there aren't very many young people, and we really need everybody to be fulfilling their potential and pulling their weight in some of our communities. So there are definitely, with depopulation, with the challenges, I mean, I'm devastated about Brexit. I'm devastated that we've closed off free movement. I'm devastated about the hostile environment, but it puts the focus back on us in Scotland to make sure that everybody who wants to work can work, because we aren't going to have people coming here as freely as we did in the past. I think we've got a bit more to do than just that, though. I think that UNCRC is a step in the right direction. So for under 18s, that will support you with your right to education. And it is one of the magical things about that piece of legislation is that it is just the first in a whole suite of UN treaties that we're planning to incorporate. So there will be rights of, you know, if we're elected again, we'll be moving towards a rights-based culture and incorporating disabilities rights as well. I think, though, basically, there are a couple of really key things that we need to do, and we've got a strategy that's been out for a couple of years now called Keys to Life, which the section about employment says we need to bust stereotypes, so we need to break down those stereotypes. And it kind of starts young. People start to look at what you can't do instead of what you can't do. And we just need to shift our way of looking at that. We need to support employment. So we need to help people like yourself, Robert, get jobs in companies and, you know, doing the things that you would enjoy doing. The other thing is supporting social enterprises. So again, up here in the Highlands and Islands, social enterprises are a very big deal. And one of the things that social enterprises do, so they are really just businesses, but they have a social purpose, and their profits that they make are put to good use. So a social purpose. And those are really, really good ways of supporting people into employment because of that core commitment to supporting the entire community. They have it at the heart, but an awful lot of family businesses have that at their heart as well. An awful lot of big businesses have an altruistic arm, largely because they know if they give people like you a chance, you'll pay them back in spades. So we just need to join up all those dots and make sure that you get the opportunities that you're entitled to and are able to use your talents and fulfill your potential.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Robert, do you want to say anything before we move on?
Nope, there's nothing.
Can I thank you?
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate the input, Robert. Again, Robert helps us in so many ways in terms of these
Yeah.
events that we do on Teams. Gets me singing and things like that. But no, thanks.
To be honest, I'm a better singer than you, Sally Ann. So
No,
we'll just
I know. But I mean, you could have kept that private. I mean, to be honest. But no, thanks, Robert. Really appreciate it. It's a really brave thing to do to step into this space. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. We're now going to move on and hear from Vange. Vange has also got a key question that she wants to ask politicians, but she's also got some thoughts about things that are important to her more generally. So Vange, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Vange. I'm from Elgin in the Highlands. So, hi. I'm 15 and I would like to talk about young people in communities and how there's like a social stigma around what we are around here, like in our communities. Like there isn't much opportunities for young people to get more involved in their communities. And if it weren't for Aberlour, I mean, I wouldn't be in school, so they would have kicked me out by now. So I'd like to start off by saying, like, there isn't like a really strong sense of community around here, and a lot of young people are kind of discarded in a way because there isn't much to do, there isn't much opportunities, and most young people like don't have enough money for those opportunities, and they just go down the wrong route. And I mean, I was pretty close to that myself, to be fair. And there's a lot of us that are like that, especially the Aberlour has helped a lot because they've kind of took us under their wing, and we've improved so much since we've actually been here. So I've improved so much since I've been here, actually. And I'd like to ask how you'd, as politicians, help communities grow and young people to be more involved in their communities and get opportunities to help, whether it be older people in communities or get help with drug use and get themselves back on the right path.
That's a great question, Vange, thank you. I'm going to start with Alison this time, then I'll go to Marie and Paul after Marie. So Alison.
Wow, what an incredible question, to be absolutely honest, and not one for which there's an easy answer. I'm not going to pretend, Vange. I was really, yeah, just very much welcome your openness there and your honesty when you said that you felt yourself you were getting quite close to taking a wrong path, and how grateful you were to Aberlour. So you've just underlined the importance of services like Aberlour. I remember before I was in Parliament, I was a local councillor in Edinburgh, and I used to go along to, I'm not going to name which community council it was, but let's just say we were sitting on these high-backed chairs, and I think there was probably nobody in the room under 45, and there's probably a lot of people in the room over 65, and the people would say, oh, I don't know why we're not attracting the young people. And it just wasn't, you know, it's probably at the wrong time of night where you might have school stuff on or other things to be doing, and it's just not an attractive environment to get young people into. So there needs to be more of an onus and insistence that we have young people in these groups and on boards and so on. It's not good enough to just say, oh, young people don't want to be involved. How do you know? Because I don't think we've tried hard enough. Like, I think if young people had been involved with the decisions that the SQA took last year from the beginning, we wouldn't have gone through all that anguish. So I think we need to make sure that there are places and that we encourage young folks straight from school. You know, we've got rights respecting schools now, we've got pupil councils and so on, but it just needs to become the norm. Apparently, I'm not sure if it's Finland, we're always referring to Finland and Scotland because it's so good at so many things, but I think 1 in 81 people stands for election there. Here, you're still a bit of an oddity if you stand for election. You know, people say, why? Well, good grief. And you know, it's just not the norm, but I think what it speaks to is a culture of people just being involved in the decisions that affect them on a local level. And our decisions, our decisions are going to be better from hearing from you today. Absolutely certain of that. But we need clearly to have better youth work services. This must not be seen as a additional luxury that we only invest in when times are good. I'm really concerned that when times are hard, this is when we see these services being cut to the absolute wire, when they're so important and they can transform the lives of so many young people. So that's got to happen. I mean, we have a manifesto commitment there for free access to sort of community hubs for our young people. There'll be some that are involved in sport, there'll be others in different activities. It's just something to give you a sense of purpose. I mean, I got involved in athletics when I was about 14 and I came from a very ordinary neighbourhood. And that for me was transformative. I've no doubt at all that that kept me from getting involved in all sorts of other things that I might have found appealing or attractive. But it's just about, you know, finding your own way and your own interests. But that is about investment. But I'm really, yeah, it's really hard for us to hear that you feel that young people are just being overlooked when your voice is so important. As someone who, you know, is a Scottish Green Party member, I have no doubt at all that it's young people who've put both the climate and nature emergencies on the front page. We have had literally thousands of young people down at the Scottish Parliament demanding change. I mean, people who have just said on a Friday, do you know what, I'm not going to school, my future is more important than this. Some schools have been more relaxed about that than others, but these young people have said, no, this is our future. So I have got no doubt as to the importance of young people being involved, and you have made sure that legislation has been strengthened in a way that wouldn't have happened if your voice wasn't there. Can I just check one thing, Vance? Did you say you were in Elgin?
Yep.
Yeah. I've got a cousin in Elgin, and you know, her parents were involved in the RAF, and they left when she was 16 when they left, and she determinedly stayed up there. And is still there. And I suppose she's someone I see as a, you know, a very young, determined person who's made a very good life for herself. And I've no doubt that you will do that. And I'm really pleased you seem to be getting so much help from Aberlour at the moment. But yeah, I hope we all stay in touch after today's event. You know, we're certainly here to help you in any way we can.
I've got a cunning plan, Alison, which I'll unveil shortly. Okay, thanks, Marie. Sorry, Vance, do you want to say anything before Marie speaks?
Thank you. I suppose it's kind of hard to speak about these things, I suppose, in communities because there's a lot of lack of opportunities and to involve the older community with the younger. So.
Okay, thanks, Vance. Marie.
Thank you, Sally Ann, and thank you, Vance. It is wonderful to hear you speak, and it is wonderful to hear you speak with such honesty. It is really important for us to hear things like that, because we get all carried away, especially at this time. You know, we think about these policies that we're pulling together, and actually hearing direct from you on the ground what it's like growing up in Moray is a real lesson to us. And I often find that chatting to people helps me when I'm thinking about policies. It helps to bring it to life. So it's really, really helpful that you've done that. I love that you've emphasised intergenerational, so that's a wee passion of mine, but mostly with younger children. So in my ministerial role, I had responsibility for early learning and childcare, and real magic happens when you bring very young children together with older people. Because very young children love an audience and older people love to give them one. So there's really magical things happen, and we've done a lot of work across the country to bring nurseries into children's homes, but of course into old people's homes. Of course, the pandemic has made it very, very difficult bringing generations together, but we will pick up that work, and they've done some very creative work to connect in ways that are safe, not just through IT, but you know, performing in the garden and stuff. I think it didn't seem impossible. You know, I was sad to hear you talk about your experience, but actually it resonated. So I think throughout the pandemic, we've seen young people getting a tough time. It's easy to blame young people for their behaviour, and I think we have a culture in Scotland and right across the UK where we're quite quick to blame young people when things go wrong. And I see that as a real responsibility for politicians to tackle that. One of the things we did to try to change that was the Year of Young People in 2018, which is a few years ago now. But it was the first of our sort of themed years that celebrated people. And it gave young people a chance to shine and to design and decide what events were held. So I spoke to young people the length and breadth of the country who talked about events that they planned, and it was like seeing their dreams come true when the events actually happened. And I'm pretty keen for that to continue. As Alison says, you get a lot of old people sitting in rooms together wondering how to engage young people and how to attract young people. And what we really need to do is hand the power over to young people to do it and not worry about the old people being involved at all. So a bit more of that would be good. One of the things that we are interested in Highland, so we have some really challenging communities in Highland, and I guess it's the same just across the border in Murray, and people find that a bit hard to believe because we've got such marvellous environments, and we don't have the same urban deprivation as some other parts of the country, but we do have some really challenging community problems, and we've been looking to Iceland, the Icelandic model, to see if it will support some of our communities. Now, there are some things I don't like about that model. One thing is it has a curfew, so you're not allowed out after a certain time of night, which I think is, quite a big ask. But one thing I do like about it is it's a promise between the children and young people in the community and the adults in the community. And that's all the adults, not just your family, all the adults, to make sure that your needs are met and to support after school clubs, to support sporting facilities, to support all the things that you need to, as you said, to keep yourself from going down a wrong path. And I think I like that idea of young people having a right, an entitlement to something from their community. And I think we could build really thriving communities using some of the pluses from that model. We're not always just looking to the Nordics. I mean, I'm minded that when the Nordic Council came to Edinburgh and I spoke to them as a children's minister, they were blown away by the fact that we have an annual cabinet. So the cabinet that runs the government, that runs the country, meets with young people once a year, every year, and those young people directly hold the cabinet to account. And that's, we kind of take it for granted that that happens in Scotland. It doesn't happen in many places, and I think that's really precious. And it was at one of those cabinet meetings that young people demanded incorporation of the UNCRC, and you can see over stages how that happened, and that was an ask of young people. So I think, I hear people say a lot, young people are the future. Well, I often correct them and say they're the now, actually. And I think it's pretty important. And I feel very excited when I think about, I know it's a bit dull to be at a boardroom table, but when I think of young people being empowered and knowing how to do stuff, knowing how to organise events, knowing how to speak up at these meetings, I think we'll have a much better country going forward if everybody is empowered and able to fulfil their potential and join in, and not just in a tokenistic way, but actually at the table deciding what happens. Then I think we'll have a good life ahead.
Yep. Thanks, Marie. Vange, do you want to say anything to Marie before we move on to Paul?
Thank you, because it's good that you're all aware of what needs to be done to help young people, and it's good that you've got involved with us to speak to us about these issues so that you can have a better idea to what extent to combat these things.
Thanks, Vange. Okay, Paul, we're just nearing the end now, so Paul will give his response, and then I'm going to move on and ask each of the politicians just to give us one commitment in the event of them being elected that we can come back to them on, that they are going to take away from this meeting, not from their party manifestos and anything like that, the learning from this meeting that they're going to take forward if they're lucky enough to be elected. Paul, firstly though.
Thank you, Sally-Ann, and thanks, Vange, for the question. I think it's a really important point. Similarly, Alison talked about being a local councillor previously. I'm a local councillor just now, so I completely can understand what Alison was saying about the decisions, the rooms where the decisions are made are often older people and often not as diverse as perhaps our communities are. So I think there's definitely something in how do we get young people around the table more. Also, very often my inbox as a councillor is full of complaints about young people, you know, telling me that they're antisocial, that because they've gone to the park, for example, in these times of COVID, they're playing a bit of music, having a chat with their pals, that's seen as a problem. You know, so we need to break down those barriers so that people don't see that as an issue. You know, it's about young people having a space and their own space, but also coexisting in the spaces that we all share. And I think, you know, as Marie said as well, sometimes young people get the blame for a lot of things that aren't actually their fault or they're misunderstood. But one of the really positive things that happened in my ward, in my community, is that the community council actually went and met with the youth group that meets in the village, who have been supported by Young Person Services at the council, and were able to do a bit of a project around what did the young people want in terms of the park that's local to us here. So what kind of spaces did they want? And the big thing was at that time a skate park, but also a kind of youth shelter where young people could have a space to be together. And that was a really simple project. It didn't cost an awful lot of money, and money was got from various sources, including the council. And that space was able to be created. And it was a partnership between the community council, who were all kind of in their 60s, and a group of young people who were kind of in their teens. So it can be done, and it is being done. That's been done in communities across Scotland. But how do we make that the norm rather than the exception, Vance? You know, I think how do we make sure that in Elgin that's happening as well as it is down here in East Renfrewshire? So for me, there's something about empowering communities further to have that intergenerational space. I think the other thing is a lot of the things that you highlight are in the kind of remit of local councils. We need to make sure that we are funding councils properly and funding our third sector partners like Aberlour and others to ensure that they can continue to deliver services. And youth work is so important, and very often it becomes what we might call the Cinderella service, so the service that gets a wee bit forgotten about. It can be prime for cuts often because it is seen as maybe, you know, a nice extra. It's not a nice extra. You know, when we say things like youth work saves and changes lives, that is absolutely true. You know, my experience growing up as a young gay man, for example, you know, if I had had access to a lot of the youth services that are now available, my life story would have been different. My journey to where I am now would have been different. So for me, there's something absolutely about valuing and investing in youth work. And I think as we recover from the pandemic, that's got to be front and centre. And it goes back to that point about recovery. There's got to be lots of different options for young people to get back out there, to enjoy their spaces, enjoy their friends, enjoy their social contact, but also to try new things, whether that be sport or arts or whatever. We need to all come together and say this is a priority and we're going to invest in it. This was my final point just on talking to young people. Another of the really powerful things that I've been involved in was our Champions Board with care experience young people. I think that's been a really positive model and can work really well because it's been about a genuinely honest dialogue with young people who have care experience. But I think we could absolutely expand that model and seek to learn from it about all young people. So for me, there's something in that as well that we can take forward. And, you know, Vange, it's great to hear your experience and thank you for sharing it. And I hope to hear more from you and all the other folks we've heard today as we go forward into Parliament. Well, hopefully I will be there with so if I am, certainly let's keep the conversation going.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Vange, do you want to say anything to Paul just in closing?
Well, Anne mentioned to me, like she wrote down like a little note that she wanted to say to you about this. Basically in Dufton you can get to Elgin, but you can't actually get back after 6 p.m. and so it's kind of pointless to put like a community space in Elgin for around money if you can't even get back. And that there aren't many like safe spaces for young people right now without having to pay for them.
Yep.
So
Okay, thanks, Vange. That's another really important. I think we could probably talk all afternoon about a number of issues in transport, and not just rural communities, especially in rural communities, but more generally, you know, in the affordability of transport, which hopefully will be addressed soon. So it just remains for me to say thank you to Vange for being here, for asking really great questions of the panel. I was supposed to sum up the discussion, but I'm just kind of going away a wee bit from the agenda, because I think what's more important actually is to hear from each of the politicians. And it is a very short roundup because we are over time, but I think it would be fair of us to ask each of the politicians to give us one commitment that they will take away from today based on the conversations we've had today, that they might be surprised that they're taken away. But they feel committed to because of what some of the young folk have said. And something that we could come back to you, if you're lucky enough to be elected in the next 6 months, and say, right, where did you get to with that, Paul? Where did you get to with that, Alison? Where did you get to with that, Marie? So what would be your one takeaway in terms of how things that this conversation have surfaced for you might have changed? We'll start with Alison, then we'll go to Marie and then Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Sally Ann. I just want to thank you, Cameron, Robert and Vange very much. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, and such a nice sort of format this afternoon, I have to say. So well done for organising it. You know, my party's done some really good work over the years, and I'm particularly proud that free bus transport for everyone aged 22 and under will come into being. We've expanded the reach of free school meals and so on. But do you know what I'm going to take away from this afternoon? I am going to commit to spend more time listening to and meeting with young people. And I'm going to make sure that there's a notable change, that I can see this happening in my diary, whether it's meeting with local school people or, you know, members of the Scottish Youth Parliament, people who are not involved in politics at all and would think that was the last thing on earth they wanted to do. I think it's really very, very important indeed that I hear from them. But I'm going to commit to make sure that I'm spending enough time hearing from people like Vange and Robert and Cameron, truly understanding what is going on the ground, because that's essential if we want to change it. And I very much hope that we do have an opportunity to meet again, and that you can hold me to that and find out what I've learned from those young people and what I've committed to further change as a result of that. So thank you very much for your input. Really helpful discussion.
Thank you. Marie?
Thanks very much. Thank you, all three of you, Vange, Cameron, Robert. I often say to people, I don't have a magic wand to wave and fix the issues that you raise with me, but the more I hear about them and how I hear about how it affects your life, the more likely I am to be able to do something about it. I feel it's been a lovely time, actually, and it's been a really nice atmosphere, really, really good conversation. And I think it will definitely help me to do my job better. So I'm very grateful for that. The one strand that I would pick out from what all three of you have said is just about the importance, and it's a reminder to me about the importance of meaningful occupation. So Cameron, you said very clearly that you felt better now that you were working. Robert, you're really keen to be working and to be getting. And Vange, you talked about not having anything to do and not having a place to go. So I think we really need to think about that as a whole. We need to think about work opportunities for young people who are finished with education, but we also need to think about occupying young people, meaningful occupation, that ability to earn money, to feel good about yourself, and the social benefits that come from that type of activity. So I'm not going to put all under 16s out to work, but I'm certainly going to think a little bit more about programs and opportunities and youth work and charities like Aberlour, who get right alongside young people and help them to fulfill their potential. I'm pretty sure of iced cakes in Elgin and Aberlour. So that's the kind of meaningful occupation I'm talking about for youngsters. But yeah, tying it in with earning for older young people, and I will be more focused on that in future. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. And Paul?
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for their contributions, to Robert, Cameron, Vange, and Aberlour for organising the event. I think it has been a nice event. I said at the outset, it's nice sometimes not to do a particularly adversarial hustings. I think actually that you can see actually the common thread that we all value children and young people, and we all want to get the best from them. Sometimes we disagree on how we get there, but we know the destination we're headed in, and it's been nice to be with Marie and Alison. And sorry to hear about your accident, Alison. I hope that it's not, you know, the campaign trail is still ongoing despite your injury. But you know, for me, my commitment, what I've heard today, which I think is really interesting, is just about amplifying the voices of young people. But I think that point we heard about young people being misunderstood. And I think that's across the three contributions I've heard, which is, you know, mental health sometimes still being stigmatized, young people not getting the right support they need in work, particularly if they have a learning disability, and young people being perhaps scapegoated, if you like, as being the source of trouble in a community. So for me, if I'm in Parliament, my contributions I make, I want to bring the voice of the young people into those and to showcase their lives, your life, and what's good and positive in your life and what contribution you're making. So that's certainly a commitment from me. And then the other part of that commitment will be what are the solutions around that. So pushing certainly for that really strong kind of youth work and youth engagement that we need, and really pushing that as a service that needs to be better funded. So in order for me to amplify the voices, I've got to listen. So again, similarly to Marie and Alison, happy to engage as much as I can with any young people who want to come and speak to me.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I know that we're hopelessly over time, and I do apologise for that, but I do agree that it's been a really good conversation, hopefully led by our young folk. So it really just leaves me to thank each of the politicians for coming along. We very much appreciate it. We know you're out in a busy campaign trail, but we felt it was important for young folk to just be given space and time in this type of atmosphere to have a really good chat with politicians. Maybe STV will adopt this approach, who knows, in the leaders' debates. But more importantly, I think I would want to just say thank you again to Vange, Robert and Cami for actually being brave enough to step into this space. Aberlour's new strategy is called Being Brave. That's a kind of that was a secret up until right now. It's going to be launched next week, and if we're going to be brave, you know, we need to be honest in our conversations, and we do that on behalf of our children and young folk. So to see our young folk being able to step into this space and with bravery is just fantastic. And I think each of the politicians probably have appreciated a different type of conversation, a different kind of dialogue. But thank you all for coming along. Thanks for all the participants who, the viewers who have stuck with us. I know we've gone a wee bit over time, we've lost some folk, but that's understandable. They probably had other commitments at 3 o'clock. So it just leaves me to say thank you once again to everybody, and I hope you have an enjoyable rest of the day. If Vange and Cameron and Robert can just stay on the call just for another 5 minutes, we're going to just take some time just to check in with everybody at the end of the session. But thanks very much, everybody, and good luck with your respective campaigns. Bye now.
Thanks all.